Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on this Zoom for an important 2021 municipal budget presentation for the City of Windsor. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens is hosting this presentation, joined by members of the city's corporate leadership team, including Onorio Colucci, Chief Administrative Officer, and Joe Mancina, Chief Financial Officer and City Treasurer. In a moment, the Mayor will provide some opening remarks, followed by a detailed overview of the process and considerations involved in this year's budget. We will conclude with questions from the media. A reminder that participants must turn your own microphone and camera on and off using the Zoom buttons in the bottom left corner of the screen. And panelists, please ensure that your camera is enabled for the entire session, but only turn your microphone on when speaking. Media members, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom screen to request a question. Once the presentation portion has concluded, media members will be called on to ask questions and your microphone will be enabled at that time. Media has been provided with a 2021 budget slide deck in advance of this presentation. Media, if your question pertains to an item in the deck, please reference the slide number and I will display it on the screen for the sake of all tuning in. Thank you for your attendance and participation today. I'll turn things over to Mayor Dilkens to start us off. Please go ahead, Your Worship.
Well, thank you very much, Dana, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this special online presentation of the 2021 municipal budget. Now, on February 22nd, members of council will consider the operating budget for this year, as well as the 10-year outlook for local infrastructure projects. And as many of you know, council voted to delay presentation of the 2021 municipal budget to give administration time near the end of 2020 to fully pursue our funding application to the Ontario Ministry of Municipal Affairs for additional relief related to losses at Windsor Airport and the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. And that proved to be a very wise decision because, as most of you know, our phase 2 application was successful. In fact, only Toronto and Brampton received more funds than the City of Windsor through the second round of Safe Restart funding. The additional time has also allowed administration to more fully categorize the projected COVID-19 impacts on the 2021 operating budget. And to that end, we now estimate that the City of Windsor is facing about $38 million in unfunded costs directly attributed to the ongoing pandemic. And I think many of you can appreciate higher costs associated with PPE, cleaning and operations, lower revenues from municipal services, reduced or eliminated dividends from our business enterprises like the tunnel and the airport. And of course, the big one is reduced payments from operations at Caesars Windsor. But as we look out over the horizon, we know that these are not permanent costs and they are discrete COVID-19 related pressures that don't naturally belong in the base budget of any municipality. And we fully expect the province and federal governments to come to the table later this year with additional operating funding for municipalities who have been on the front line of pandemic response since the start of this global crisis. So we plan to carry this $38 million pressure alongside our regular budget and will commit ourselves to doing our part to mitigate internally as much as possible. But it would be certainly unfair to ask Windsor taxpayers to resolve this $38 million pressure on our own before the end of February and before we have any insight into federal or provincial budgets or relief funding. We will not be shy about our request to Ottawa or Queen's Park. In fact, that advocacy begins next week at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities virtual summit with the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Finance for the federal government. We will continue to update council and the public about how we are managing to whittle down this $38 million on a quarterly basis. And I want to be very clear, if the federal and provincial governments do not come to the table in a meaningful way, then council and the City of Windsor will certainly have some difficult decisions to make. But it would be unfair to ask this City Council to make those choices today without first giving time for the process of confederation to unfold. Now, let's talk about the good news. Separate and apart from the COVID-19 pressures, we are delivering a budget with an overall property tax levy impact of 0%. Again, 0%. This means, and this has meant, taking a hard line against any new initiatives while also focusing our resources on the priorities that matter to Windsor residents. Now, 0% does not mean no new investments. In fact, city operations will see a modest increase of about $2.5 million. Our agencies, boards, and commissions have asked for $3 million in additional funds this year. And we are also continuing our asset management plan capital contribution, which represents about an additional $5 million in funding towards capital projects. Provincial reductions in the education levy for our municipality result in the amount of $10.5 million in savings, which fully offset the investments outlined above. And that is how we have achieved an overall 0% bottom line. Now, I know that there will be some out there who would want us to cut further and lower the net impact to municipal ratepayers, while others will suggest that now is the time to make additional investments. And personally, I can see both sides. I came to this council as a strong advocate for fiscal responsibility, and I'm exceptionally proud of the work that we have collectively done. At the same time, as mayor over the past few years, I have recognized that the time comes when you need to invest to enhance public assets and invest in the amenities that a growing community needs. Remember that we are still needing to manage the $38 million COVID-19 related pressures, and so additional cuts may yet be required if federal and provincial governments don't step forward. But for today, with all of the facts that we have at our disposal, this is a balanced plan that protects Windsor ratepayers while investing in the services that our community deserves and expects. Next, I would like to address our capital plan. A component of that is the asset management plan that I mentioned a moment ago. Now, the AMP is an important provincial requirement. It is a legislated responsibility that all municipalities have in place, a plan to cover the long-term costs associated with repair and maintenance of our local infrastructure. But our capital plan also speaks to the new investments in parks and culture and roads and sewers and active transportation that people expect. In fact, by 2030, we plan to spend $1.6 billion on these kinds of investments in the city of Windsor. Let me say it again, $1.6 billion we are going to spend by 2030. And I think any of you would agree that this is a huge sum by any objective measure. But even in the crafting of this 10-year plan, trade-offs and hard choices had to be made. Some projects that we'd all like to see built this year or next year will simply have to wait. Some projects need to wait for matching funds from either the provincial or federal governments. But residents should be assured that we are making historic investments in our infrastructure to improve the quality of life for everyone in our community. This capital plan delivers on many infrastructure requirements, but let me name a few. $5.5 million towards reconstruction of the eastbound EC Road from Dominion to Dougal. $3.4 million to complete a roadway, a new roadway at WFCU Arena. That roadway will be off Lausanne. Investing $4.2 million towards repair at the iconic Peace Fountain. $27 million to start construction of the alignment work at Lausanne and County Road 42, which will take a couple of years to complete and is a massive amount of work, $27 million. A down payment of $4.3 million towards the reconstruction of Roseland Golf and Curling Club's clubhouse. $94 million to continue phase 2 and phase 3 of the Riverside Vista project. Spending $6 million to rehabilitate Huron Church from College to Tecumseh. Over $9 million along Dominion Boulevard to widen that road from Northwood to Taunton. Continuing the important work on Banwell Road with almost $3 million more to be spent on this important arterial roadway in the next 2 years, and about $31 million to complete major reconstruction of Provincial Road. And this is just a short list of the projects included in our capital plan. In fact, in 2021 alone, we are proposing to spend $170 million to help build up our city. So a few months ago, we launched a new capital projects online portal to showcase with ease the exact location of some of our capital projects. And this simple online tool allows anyone to search by type of project so to see what kind of infrastructure is being developed in their neighborhood and on their street. It's part of our commitment to transparency, and we plan to continuously improve this tool moving forward. Now, before I pass it on to others to present, I want to take a moment to thank outgoing CAO Onorio Colucci for his lifetime of service to the city of Windsor. And later this spring, OC will retire just shy of 37 years of continuous service to the city of Windsor and his community. And we all know what a large presence he's had, and his legacy certainly has been on the city's path to fiscal responsibility. And it was not an easy journey, and I can assure you he's got his fair share of scars to prove it. But we are in an enviable position that we are in today, largely because of the efforts and the work of Onorio and his team and many in the city of Windsor. In today's presentation, it might be OC's final budget, but his vision and discipline has been instilled in all of us at City Hall. And OC, to you, on behalf of my colleague councils, thank you and congratulations. And at this time, I invite Onorio Colucci, our Chief Administrative Officer, and Joe Mancina, our Chief Financial Officer, to guide us through this overview of the proposed 2021 municipal budget for the City of Windsor. Gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the very kind words. It's certainly been a labor of love for me, and while I will miss people, I think we've accomplished some good things, and I certainly thank you for, as I say, the very kind words. First, I'd like to thank the dedicated employees in the finance department across the corporation for the hard work and dedication that was required to develop the 2021 budget. And this was done while facing significant challenges from the ongoing pandemic. While, as the mayor said, we are recommending a budget that reflects a 0% total property tax levy increase, we are also recommending significantly increased funding for key priorities such as roads and sewers. Looking back over the past few years, the 0% increase in the total levy marks the 10th time in the last 16th year that this goal has been accomplished, and adds to the savings that have been enjoyed by taxpayers over that time frame. It is estimated that had the tax levy increased even at only the modest average of 2% per year during that time, the current levy would be approximately $100 million, or nearly 25% higher than is recommended in the 2021 budget. The total accumulated savings for taxpayers over that 16-year period are estimated to be a total of nearly $1 billion, and that is with a B. Of note, during this same time frame, our spending on capital projects, primarily roads and sewers, has nearly tripled. Equally as important during this time frame, our debt levels have been slashed and our rainy day funds, namely reserves, have been increased significantly. And this allows greater flexibility in dealing with unexpected requirements such as those that have arisen during the current pandemic. As Mayor said, this is my last budget before I retire, so I'm especially pleased that the hard work of our dedicated staff has enabled the development of a budget for 2021, which continues the tradition of being responsive to our residents' fiscal expectations and their service requirement expectations as well. I now turn it over to Mr. Mancina, our treasurer.
Thank you, OC, and good morning, everyone. As Mayor Dilkens and Mr. Colucci have noted, the 2021 budget has posed some unique challenges as a result of the global pandemic that were not even imaginable 1 year ago during the city's 2020 budget setting exercise. However, prudent financial decisions of City Council over the past several years have served the city well. During 2020, healthy cash flows and strong liquidity resulting from several years of fiscally prudent budgeting, as well as pay-as-you-go, debt management, and reserve enhancement strategies have positioned the city well to weather this storm. 2021 will continue to pose challenges with an estimated unfunded $38 million financial impact resulting from the ongoing pandemic, continued reduction in casino revenues, dividends from the tunnel and YQG Windsor Airport, impacts on recreation facilities and programs, reduced transit ridership levels, lower parking revenues, and the ongoing need to fund appropriate PPE equipment and enhanced cleaning, just to name a few, will result in a projected $38 million shortfall. We have isolated these unique one-time budgetary impacts from the property taxpayer-funded base budget in 2021 and will aggressively seek to mitigate $38 million shortfall by pursuing senior government level relief funding, much in the same manner as we did in 2020. With City Council's support, administration put forth a strong application for Phase 2 municipal relief funding in late 2020 and successfully secured additional funding to offset total deficits of over $9 million for YQG Windsor Airport and the Windsor Tunnel. As well, the Phase 2 funding provided additional relief of approximately $5 million to the city's budget to further offset additional 2020 COVID impacts to city departments. To date, the province has committed to an amount of $5.1 million in municipal relief funding for 2021, but much more is needed. Administration will closely monitor these estimates as we make our way through 2021 and provide updates during our quarterly variance reporting as to the latest projections and the latest status of all government relief and mitigation measures undertaken to address this shortfall. Administration remains confident that the city's healthy financial profile and its continued strong fiscal discipline will allow us to weather the financial challenges we will face in the post-COVID-19 period. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Joe. And let me not understate, because I mentioned OC, it's his final budget and certainly deserves a lot of congratulations for a career that was quite exceptional. Let me not understate the contribution of Joe and his team especially in 2020, as they went through the phase 2 funding. It was a huge endeavor. So Joe, on behalf of City Council and myself, thank you for leading that charge and getting the money that we needed to bring the budget in even for 2020. That should not be understated. And thank you for all the work to put this budget together as well. Many have heard me say that 2021's budget is going to be a difficult conversation, and our community is still caught in the grasp of the COVID-19 global pandemic. And as vaccinations move forward and the virus continues to spread, communities like ours continue to face extreme challenges. But this 2021 budget is part of a bigger picture. We're building a community that invests in core priorities while still keeping taxes low. Our population is growing at a rate faster than Ontario and of Canada. Crime is on the decline. Our long-term debt is down and our reserves are rising. Our commitment to fiscal responsibility put us in a strong position to weather the pandemic storm that we're facing today. And last year, we delivered on my promise to keep the tax rate in line with inflation. And this proposed plan brings taxes in line with that commitment to you once again. We know individuals and families and businesses are struggling in the face of COVID-19, but here in Windsor, we are in this together. And at City Hall, we've worked very hard to bring forward a budget that all residents can be proud of. So thank you for watching today. And Dana, with that, I'll turn it back to you for questions from the media.
Thank you, Mayor Dilkens. Again, if media members have a question, please take this time to use the raise hand function in Zoom. As well, when you are brought on screen, if there is a certain slide within the presentation that you were provided with ahead of time, please indicate the slide number and I will bring it up on screen. Our first question comes from Rich Garten at CTV. Rich, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Just regarding the property tax levy, I think it was last year much was made about the MPAC reassessment impacts. What's the status of those reassessments, and are those factored into this year's budget?
So the good question, Rich. So the province deferred the MPAC assessment that was supposed to take effect last year, I believe. And so now what's happening is they're undertaking the work this year, and that new reassessment is scheduled to be implemented in 2022.
Okay, and just to clarify, what is the exact number of capital investments for 2021?
$170 million.
Okay.
Thanks, Rich. Next question, Brian Cross, Windsor Star. Brian, please go ahead. Brian, can you hear me all right? Please go ahead and enable your microphone.
Hi, can you explain the money that I guess the savings that the province is not taking? How did you save 10.5 and come out and have how does that sort of all come out to a zero?
Yeah, so I'll let Joe or OC jump in, but let me say that this is not an anomaly. Every single year, at least that I've been mayor, we've benefited from a decrease in the education tax rate here in the city of Windsor, and we've been able to use that partly to help keep taxes low. And so the fact that there is money coming from the province is not unusual, but Joe, maybe you can fill in some of the blanks that I missed.
Yes, thank you. So as the Mayor Dilkens has indicated, it's not an anomaly. Every year the province sets education rates across the province that then are levied by municipalities and collected and remitted to the province. In this particular year, there is a reduction that has been put forward, which is the $10.5 million on the education levy side. And again, that forms part of the overall property levy that the city collects, inclusive of the municipal levy. So as the mayor has indicated, that's consistent with the prior years. We always factor in the education portion as well as the municipal levy portion in the overall calculation of the property tax levy.
Maybe I'll add that normally we don't typically have the levy for education when we're doing budgets. Because we've delayed the budget this year, we were able to actually have the exact rates.
And Brian, let me jump in as well, because there's other good news for the story. Certainly the amount this year is larger than normal, but let me say that there is a benefit here, and we know that there, in some ways, and I said this to you yesterday in our conversation and part of it's reported in the paper today, that we're in a bit of a tale of two cities, where you have many folks who have been working, municipal employees, healthcare workers, teachers, and they continue to receive their salary, and they haven't necessarily felt the financial pain of that the pandemic has caused. In fact, because stores are closed and because you can't really vacation, you may actually be putting more money in the bank for some of those folks. At the other end, we also recognize that we have our largest tourist attraction, Caesars Windsor, that is coming up on about a year of being closed, and that there are over 2,000 people in that one employer who have not worked for the better part of a year. And there are many small businesses as well that have been greatly challenged because of the border closure, but also because of the COVID restrictions and the lockdown. And so why I'm teeing this all up and saying this is that part of the 10.5 million will be directed directly to commercial and industrial property holders. And so there will be a benefit. And so when folks, and we've heard them loud and clear, when they say, what are you doing for small business? There will be a small business benefit in 2021 that is applied through this property tax rebate, the $10.5 million. And they will see the benefit of that come April. Guys, we'll do the policy in around April. And so that will all shake out. And like we do every year, we figure out what proportion gets spread to different taxes, what different classes in the property tax system. But no doubt, because of this 10.5 million that the province has sent down, there will be a benefit to those who hold either industrial or commercial properties.
Maybe just one more thing I'll add to that. The education rates are levied at the same rate for residential properties, same rate across every municipality in the province. Commercial and industrial vary across jurisdictions, and the province had started some years ago down the road of equalizing those, and then they put that on hold. This essentially continues that, and we're certainly grateful for that.
Follow up?
Can I just add, the idea that you're saving, you find out you have a $10.5 million savings or from the province, and that coincidentally turns out to be the exact same amount of money, additional money you're spending at City Hall. How did that work out?
I can maybe start. We were down the path of approving the rates for the city. So we were set on achieving zero on that part of it, not knowing exactly the education rates. So we were going on the assumption that we would have to make some fairly drastic cuts to achieve that. So once we were finished with the process of preparing the budget, or near the end of it, we had some amounts still left that we would have need to cut with significant pain, if I can put it that way. Because we received the good news on the education rates, we were able to build a budget that is certainly fiscally responsive on the municipal side, but also avoided those late painful cuts that would have been necessary without the 10.5 million decrease that we learned was coming from the province.
And so Brian, let me just try and be even more clear with that, that there's no magic to this. And so at the end of the day, you have, thank you, Dana, for that slide. So we collected $426 million last year. We're collecting $426 million this year. As long as I've been here, we've never played, and I think when Eddie Francis as well, for a decade, we've never played the shell game of saying, oh, we're not increasing our rate. And some municipalities will say that, but then their assessment goes up and they're actually bringing in millions of dollars more. That's not the case here. So we've never played that shell game. And if you look at the 426 million, our top line number, and you compare that over the last decade, you'll see the growth that has happened there. In those years when we held taxes flat for 8 years in a row, the number simply didn't change. And so to answer your question directly, the ABCs, the agencies, boards, and committees, when land ambulance has an increase, when the health unit has an increase, when police have an increase, those costs come through and flow through that account. And so those are actually fairly modest this year, just under $3 million. And there's there's some discretion for council in some of those accounts, like police. They could simply say, no, we're not giving you an increase. But that's generally not what happens. We try and make sure that when it's coming out of the board level, that it's reasonable when it's sent to the city. AMP was something that was already approved by City Council. So that was 1.16, already approved last year. You'll recall that discussion, and that will be going on for the better part of 6 years to collect the money that brings us up to fund our asset management plan. To answer your question now really precisely, the other part here where you see $2.5 million for total city department needs, we probably could have made that almost zero and shown a marginal tax decrease. But as we talked about the $38 million and the risk with COVID, we wanted to make sure at a city that we were at least being somewhat responsible when it came to having cash set aside as a contingency in case we didn't receive all the money from the province and the federal government. And I'm tipping my hand a little bit. You could probably figure it out if you read the budget, but we want to be somewhat responsible to say we have at least a bit of a contingency if we don't receive all of that $38 million. So we don't need to collect the contingency. We could have probably shown a 0.5% decrease here, but it would have been not the most responsible thing to do knowing the climate that we're in. And at the end of the day, that $2.5 million will give us some flexibility. The contingency amount will give us some flexibility moving forward, which is important for those creating the budget and for City Council as well. Guys, jump in if I missed anything.
Good.
I was going to say exactly what Mayor Dilkens has said. I mean, certainly we were advocating for building up some contingency funds because of the unprecedented challenges we've obviously indicated on the COVID side for 2021. And so to Brian's question, the additional opportunity through the education reduction provided an opportunity for us to do that. And certainly it's a prudent thing to do. We will face some tough challenges in 2021. And so normally we always build in a standard contingency of about $1.5 million for the sort of inability at times to predict certain things and to deal with that. And that served us well. But this year, given the unique circumstances, we really felt that needed to be enhanced. And certainly, as Mayor Dilkens has said, that was certainly from the education side that provided an opportunity to assist with that.
And if I can add, it also allows us to have some money in reserve to match grant requirements from senior levels of government for capital projects that will likely be announced in the future.
Thank you for the question. Media, do remember that if there is a slide that you'd like to be shown during your question or referencing, as well as panelists present, if there's something that you would like on screen to as you're referencing as well, please don't hesitate to ask. Our next question comes from Gord Bacon, AM 800. Gord, go ahead.
Good morning. So you talked a bit about this being a bit of a budget crunch, obviously with everything going on with COVID. Is there some specific capital projects or initiatives that maybe are going by the wayside you can actually point to that maybe aren't going to be done this year so you could save some money?
Actually, no, just the opposite. We've added to the capital budget this year. And so much like in 2020, I remember the conversation clearly about the celestial beacon as an example, where people said, oh, you shouldn't be spending the money in COVID year. It's not a good thing, guys. We were very clear from the beginning. We do not want to cut the capital budget. Those projects are important, but they also create jobs. And at a time where you had a situation where people were out of work and people were on unemployment and people were scared, we said we want to make sure that we get those capital projects out the door and keep employment going to the best that we can in our community. And we're not alone, Gord. I think if you look at what happens at times like these and you watch what happens even in the federal government, its budget coming out very soon, and the provincial government's budget coming out in March, it's the same thing. How do we get more money in capital projects down to the province and the municipal governments, because they know that they are economic engines and job creators. And so we have not scaled back on the capital budget, and we've actually added to it because of the AMP this year, and those are important projects and we intend to deliver on them all. Now, saying that, when we get to the end of this year, if we have a hole of $38 million, say we receive nothing, we have a small contingency set aside, but there's still a huge gap. Council would have to consider, they would have to consider what capital projects may be deferred for a year in order to eat that one-time deficit that we have. We hope never to have to get there. And I've heard the province also say that that's the last thing they want municipalities to do. But it's one of those things that you'd have to consider just in being responsible and reasonable on how to fund a deficit of that size.
You actually answered my second question there, so we're good. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gord. Media members, any additional questions? Please use the raise hand function. All right. Oh, a follow-up from Brian Cross. Brian, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious where growth accounts for all this. If the total tax take is $426 million and there's been growth, doesn't that represent a tax decrease overall for a regular resident?
So Brian, perhaps I'll take that. So as in every year, we do a look at what is the increased growth assessment and what are the taxes related to that. So that has been factored into the budget. Certainly the positive economic circumstances over the last number of years have assisted. So we have a growth number built into the budget of $1.8 million. So that's certainly assisted as additional revenue to offset some of the cost drivers that we naturally incur each year. I mean, contractual increases and things of that nature. So yes, there is a growth amount that's included as well, $1.8 million that will be coming in within those estimates.
Okay.
The thing to say about that too is that growth is not paid by existing ratepayers. That's paid by new assessment. And so it isn't really, that levy is not on the backs of the same taxpayers as last year.
Follow-up?
No, that's good for me.
Thanks very much. Any additional questions, members of the media? A question from Sanjay Maru at CBC Windsor. Sanjay, please go ahead.
So good morning, everybody. As we look ahead to February 22nd for the budget deliberation day there, from your previous comments there, Mayor Dilkens, if the province or the federal government isn't able to pitch in any more additional funds to offset that $38 million deficit, from those prior comments, Mayor Dilkens, can the city kind of say that, okay, it looks like the city's going to put the priority on shutting down or kind of postponing those capital projects, or would a tax increase still be on the table?
I think what happens at the end of the year, we're not allowed to carry deficits. So say we receive nothing from any other level of government, which I think is highly unlikely. But say that were the case, what has to happen, and Joe, please correct me where I stray here, is that the city is required to fund the deficit in the next year. And that could be by simply cutting capital projects. It could be looking at some capital and tweaking some operating spending. It could be issuing debt. You may issue one-time debt to say that's how we're funding this one-time expense and pay it off over a period of years. And so there are multiple levers that are available to the city to deal with that. I don't expect that we'll get into the position where we're trying to fund the whole amount. I think if you just look at the Globe and Mail 2 weeks ago, the city of Toronto, as an example, is facing a projected deficit of about $960 million because of COVID for 2021. And so there is a high understanding at the highest levels of the federal government and the highest levels of the provincial government that municipalities will need some transitional funding in 2021 as the vaccines arrive and people get inoculated, with the hope that once we get to 2022, things stabilize and become more normal in terms of operations.
Sanjay, follow up?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right. This seems to conclude the question requests.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting years, guys, where we usually sit around in person, which is always preferable. And we sort of guide you through the operating budget, and we tell you about this new hire and that new hire and how we're going to do things. Frankly, this year it was probably one of the most difficult budgets these gentlemen on the screen had to prepare, but at the same time, one of the easiest to explain because you won't see a lot of additions to the budget. This is a very lean budget that allows things to continue status quo. for 2021, as we recognize that there are still challenges in the community, challenges that we're facing as a corporation. And we don't want to, we want to change as little as possible and add as little as possible this year. And so we think we've found the right chord and struck the right note here to deliver for the residents of our community. And again, OC and Joe, my thanks on behalf of City Council for your work on this budget.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, media, for attending today. Immediately following this webinar, a recording will be available on the City of Windsor Facebook page for anyone who is not able to tune in live today. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.